this first movie, I'm gonna ask Katia to bring it in for us. It is called Operation Varsity Blues, the college admission scandal, and it can be seen on Netflix. Katia, tell us what this one is about.
Well, we all saw it on the news. Was it last year or the year before? It all seems so long ago, but so close. How some of our elite people go through all kinds of ways to get their children into college. And boy, the scheming, the money being passed around, they make the mafia look like a starter package. I mean, it's just, and the crazy part I still have to ask myself is, um, how there is no check and balance. Like really, if certain things hadn't come out, it would still be going. Maybe in some parts it still is. Maybe people were like, I'm gonna wait 6 months and get right back to it. But some of our Hollywood finest, SATs was scary for me too, but I still suffered through it. I did what I had to get over that 1,000, and I was like, you know what, my grades are good enough.
So this
But
really, so it's really interesting. Thank you for bringing that in, Katia. It's really interesting. One of the things I forgot to say is this is a documentary, but what's really interesting about it though is that they have actors playing some of the principals in the film, and that's because, well, they can do that because they have the real transcripts of these conversations. And when you listen to these conversations, I mean, it's brazen, it's bold, it's really out there. And these people do some stuff to make sure that they're going to get their kids in school. KB, what did you think about this?
Yeah, for me, I mean, the documentary was fascinating. As Katia said, we all saw it on the news 2 years ago. We kind of saw it based on the lens of Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman, more so than the like elite businessmen that were involved. So for me, going into this documentary, it was good to kind of get a sense of who the roster of parents actually were, and what they did behind the scenes, and kind of, what their careers look like and why they did it. But, the striking thing for me was the end of the documentary. When we got to the end and you're trying to find out, who's guilty, who pled not guilty, the amount of people who pled not guilty and didn't get sentenced to anything was the wildest part to me. I'm like, they have you on tape, on record. They know that you did it, yet you still pled not guilty and still walked away and got to live your life. That's wild to me. Like, I'm
Wow.
like, oh, okay.
yeah,
And
like
that
your
speaks
children
solely to
shouldn't
the white
try to go to
privilege.
community college.
Well,
Don't you
that
feel
speaks.
that way? You're like, I feel like if your kid tries to come to community college, you'd be like, nah, sir, this is for kids that want to go to school.
You know what? It's wild because that speaks to the white privilege of the documentary of it all. Just the fact that they were able to be like, not guilty, and they moved on. I will say some of the kids were in the dark. So it's important to note that not all of the kids knew what was going on. A few did, like Lori, they did say Lori Loughlin's daughter did actually know what was going on, and she was in conversation with her parents. So she is to be held responsible in that regard. But some of the other kids literally had no idea. They were just doing what their parents told them because they trusted that their parents were doing something for them.
I think that's a really good
And
point. Nancy, what did you think about this one?
well, I haven't seen it yet, but having gone to USC, I was personally offended when I first heard about this because for me, I did the SATs. I had after school, programs and stuff like that, like activities, speech and debate, all of those things, references, all of those things that you have to do to get into a school like USC, and you don't know like what your chances are and all of that, studying, all of that. And they just, like, their parents just said, hey, and the really offensive thing to me was the fact that they could have just bought like regular rich parents do, just buy a fucking library. Excuse me, sorry.
That's okay.
Apologies.
That's what
Just,
I'm saying. Donate money to a scholarship fund. At least do some
yeah,
good.
But here's the
right.
thing on that. I get you, Nancy. But here's the thing on that is that the amount of money that you had to donate to really to, like you said, buy a library, and the prospect of maybe you'll get in, because the reality is that everybody doesn't get in, and they talk about that. So there are people who do buy that library, and they be like, for real, I didn't get my kids in. So it's this was the bargain basement way of doing it, and it really worked. If the purpose of this documentary was to explicitly show how the rich get richer and how money rules and how people actually get away with it, then this documentary really did it. I'm gonna tell you, I was in on this one all the way through because I think, KB, what you talk about, that we get to see who the people are, but then the conversations were fascinating, and then learning about this man who is orchestrating all of this, it was really fascinating. And so on the one hand, you know that we know that this stuff happens, but on the other hand, we don't know how this stuff happens. So it was two things that worked for me.
Yeah, I
The
mean,
other
he
thing
was
I
truly
want
a
to
master
say,
manipulator. He was truly a master manipulator. And the most interesting part to me was how the investigators, because they do kind of weave in conversations with investigators throughout the documentary, the investigator said that with Felicity Huffman's daughter in particular, he had told he told the parents, oh, her grades are not good enough to get in, and they pulled her transcripts and they were like, actually, that's not true. She would have gotten in regardless based on her grades and her academic standing. And I was like,
Kathis?
no,
And that's
he
what
was
I
a scammer.
found interesting.
He was
Yeah,
a
and that.
scammer. Go ahead,
Mhm.
Nancy.
And what I found interesting about it when it was first in the news is that Lori Loughlin, her husband, is an alumni. So you have that fact. He's an alumnus, and they have all of this money, and she's in entertainment, like long-standing. I really don't think that their kids would have been rejected. Like I don't see that happening. I mean, um, especially for a film school.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in entertainment already, so I really I didn't see that happening. So especially for them, it just seems like it was overkill. It was really something, especially I think one of the things that I read was that their daughter, the first week of school was on a boat with one of the college administrators, like one of the admitting administrators. So if you're like that close with people from the school, like why do you have to do all that? Like
Yeah.
to me, it just sounded like especially listening to Lori, like, look, I don't know her or anything like that, but the attitude that I saw in the media was very much like, you can't do anything to me. I don't care. Um, whatever. And then how they sort of cannibalized each other, her and her husband, when it turned out that there actually was going to be jail time. Then it suddenly was, it wasn't my idea, it was his idea, you
Yeah.
know.
No,
I think it goes to a bigger picture about white privilege, about parents telling their kids that they are entitled to things that they haven't earned, you know?
Exactly.
Reggie, you and I both have kids in college. And one of the things that I said to my daughter when we started this college process, we are not looking at schools that we know this is not for you. And it doesn't mean that you're not smart, doesn't mean that you shouldn't go to college, but we're going to look at this realistically. Of course, you should have one school on there that's your dream school that's out of reach. You never know, right? Obviously, shoot for the stars. But at the same time, it's very important as a parent to have a realistic conversation with your children when it comes to this, right? And also, the other thing is, I knew that my daughter also wanted to, like my husband and I went to Temple, we were alumni, my sister went, and yes, put all that in the application. You done got 3 tuitions out of 3 family members, got that right. So put that on there. But always it was like, we are going to find the best place for you, not the best place. And we're not poor, we're middle class, we're not rich, but we're doing okay. But the problem is when you start your kids off into believing that they should be somewhere, even if they haven't earned it or if it isn't the right fit, it sets them up for failure. Because Lori Loughlin's kids, her daughter, if you look at that whole red table conversation, was living in that bubble, you know what I mean? Where of no consequences, no understanding or no wanting to understand how the real world works. And what's really heartbreaking is that California is one of those states that fought to have affirmative action taken away for you to be able to go to some of these schools. And it really makes me upset because you have poor, disenfranchised kids who don't have those resources, who went to inferior schools, but still managed to get good grades, still managed to make lemonade out of really bad, bad lemons. And they question those kids being on campus, but they never question these types of kids being on questions. And that's why I always say to people when they say, well, oh, you went to college, excuse me, on affirmative action. I'm like, go kick rocks. I got in, I earned that, I earned my degree, I earned my spot. Can you say the same? So I really do think it's a conversation we need to continue to have, to look at how higher education constantly punishes minorities. But as Kay-B says, you have all these people that admit it to doing wrong, and there's no lesson learned. They're going to turn around, wait for this to cool down, and do it for their other kids.
I think,
or do it for their grandkids. Just do it for the nenext generation.
I think that you bring up a couple of good points, but we do have to move on to the next movie. But and I think the point that this, one of the points that this film does is it's actually a cry to parents as to how they are preparing and getting their kids ready for school. Is that this whole issue of this over is so hyper a college that it even talks about this, how the kids are just so stressed out because they think that this is it. I don't remember doing all of this stuff to try to get into to college. I worked hard, I did my grades, I did all that type of stuff, but I just don't remember working as hard as some of these kids do today. And I say this not even jokingly, I'm not sure that I would be able to get into the colleges that I got into today, based upon the fierce competition and all the stuff that people are doing. For me, this is one of those documentaries that bring out a lot of questions more than answers. It tells you what people were doing, but it actually makes you question whether there's a lot more out there. And I believe for sure there is. So I'm saying this is a watch it. Katya, what do you think?
Oh yeah,
You think
definitely.
KB?
I actually, can I just say one more thing? I think
No,
also,
no, this
I'm
is,
sorry. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, I think it's important too that parents, this documentary shows that parents need to actually talk to their kids. Because I think, especially in the case of Lori Loughlin's daughter, she didn't even want to go to college. She didn't want to go to college because her parents never graduated from college. So her dad never graduated. He just went for 3 years and he left. Does that mean he still has connections? Absolutely. But she was like, they're successful. They didn't go to college. I don't want to go. Talk to your kids because you might be wasting your time anyway. They don't
100%. I'm glad you said that. And the other thing too is I'm so glad you said that, not to harp on this. The one thing I said to my daughter during this process, you go to college for you. Do not go to college to please your father and I. It's a very expensive investment for you to be going because you want to go because your friends are going. You don't want to be left behind. We're not doing that. I want to be very clear. I said to her, as we're filling this out, we're sitting at the computer. Go for you. I went for me. Your father went for him. If you need a year, you need to figure out some things. This is the time to speak up. Because once that check is cleared, we are committed. Yeah.
No, I love that because my oldest daughter did a gap year. So like, look, if there's some way that you need to kind of figure all that stuff out, what's right for you, let's do that. So Nancy, you haven't seen it, so I'm just going to say to you, it's a watch it.
It's a watch it, right?
Yeah,
right.
I
agree.
You should definitely check this one out, and I hope people who are in college checks it out. Will check it out. I hope people who are trying to go to college will check it out, and obviously I hope parents will check it out as well. There'll be a lot of questions, and it'll be, as you can see with our discussion, a lot of discussion here.